Every morning at Naval Base Coronado, while senior officers drank their coffee and complained about the San Diego humidity, Maya Chun was already hard at work. By 0530 hours, she'd have all the specialized equipment arranged with naval precision. In the armory, her movements methodical and focused, every action serving a purpose beyond what others could see. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The ritual meant something to her, honoring traditions greater than herself. The other naval personnel barely noticed her. To them, she was just the weapons maintenance specialist who cleaned their firearms, calibrated their scopes, and ensured their gear functioned flawlessly during operations. Lieutenant Commander Jackson Reed, the Special Warfare Training Supervisor, treated her like an afterthought that occasionally required direction. "Chun, make sure those MP5s are spotless before the afternoon training session," Reed would bark, without making eye contact. "And don't touch the specialized equipment. That's for qualified operators only." Maya would nod silently, taking the cleaning supplies to her workstation. She'd run her cloth along each barrel with the same care. A master violinist might show a Stradivarius. Her hands moved with practiced familiarity, checking every mechanism, every sight adjustment, every potential flaw. The SEALs who occasionally watched assumed it was just thoroughness. They had no idea she was mentally cataloging every imperfection, every misalignment that could affect accuracy by millimeters at distance, the difference between life and death in the field. During lunch breaks, while others gathered in the mess hall sharing stories about weekend plans and off-duty adventures, Maya sat alone reviewing technical manuals or gazing out toward the Pacific Ocean, its vast expanse reminding her of childhood. Days spent on the waters near her grandmother's village in the Philippines. She'd grown up on fishing boats where her grandfather had taught her that reading the water meant survival and patience meant everything. "Hey, Chun," called out Petty Officer First Class Dominic Vega, a cocky 24-year-old from Miami who'd barely qualified on his last shooting test. "You ever actually fire any of these weapons you're always polishing, or just pretend?" His buddies laughed. Maya looked up from the sight she was adjusting, offered a small professional smile, and returned to her work. Let them think what they wanted. Her grandfather had always told her the tiger doesn't announce her presence to monkeys. The truth was Maya Chun had been handling firearms since she was 12 years old. Every summer for 6 years, her grandfather, whose service record in the Philippine Navy remained largely classified, had taken her to remote coastal areas. He taught her to read current patterns in the way water moved, to adjust for wind by watching how it affected the surface of the ocean, to control her breathing so precisely that her heartbeat wouldn't disturb her aim from a moving boat. But the U.S. Navy didn't care about informal training or family traditions. They cared about documented qualifications, formal certifications, official training records. Maya had the skills but lacked the paperwork. So she accepted the role they gave her, invisible support staff who maintained equipment for real operators. The irony wasn't lost on her. She watched them waste ammunition on shots she could make blindfolded. Some struggled with basic stabilization techniques her grandfather had drilled into her before she could drive. But she remained silent, did her job, served without recognition. Reed seemed to take particular pleasure in reminding her of her place. "You're not qualified on any of these weapon systems, Chun. Your job is maintenance, not marksmanship. Leave the shooting to people who actually know what they're doing." What Reed didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Maya's quiet demeanor wasn't from incompetence. It was from discipline. Her grandfather had taught her that true marksmen didn't boast about their skills. They simply performed when performance mattered. And deep down, Maya suspected that day was coming soon. The rumors started 3 weeks later, spreading through the base like wildfire. Word was that Maya had failed her basic firearms qualification badly. Petty Officer Vega, who seemed to make it his personal mission to ensure everyone knew about her supposed inadequacies, was more than happy to share the details. 25-yard stationary targets, he announced during lunch, loud enough for half the mess hall to hear. She couldn't hit center mass if her life depended on it. Reed had to stop the test early because she was embarrassing herself. The story grew with each telling. By the time it reached the training facility, Maya had supposedly missed every single shot. By evening formation, she'd allegedly broken down crying on the range. The narrative was always the same. The maintenance specialist who thought she could play with the operators had been humiliated. Lieutenant Commander Reeves did nothing to discourage the gossip. If anything, he seemed to enjoy it. Chun's good at one thing, he'd tell anyone who'd listen. Making weapons look pretty. But firing them, that's a different skill set entirely. What none of them noticed was how Maya reacted when she watched their training sessions. Every time an operator missed an obvious shot, her eyes would narrow almost imperceptibly. When they struggled with angle compensation or failed to account for crosswinds, she'd tense slightly, like someone watching a surgeon use the wrong instrument for a routine procedure. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Petty Officer Second Class Leila Nasser, a communications specialist from Michigan, was one of the few who paid attention. A competitive shooter before joining the Navy, she recognized real marksmanship knowledge when she saw it. "You know something about shooting," Leila said one afternoon, finding Maya adjusting the trigger pull on a sidearm in the maintenance room. It wasn't a question. Maya looked up, meeting her eyes for a moment before returning to her work. "I know how to clean them. That's not what I meant." Leila pulled up a chair. "Yesterday when Rodriguez was struggling with that moving target drill, you shook your head before he even pulled the trigger. You knew he was going to miss low and right. Lucky guess." "No," Leila said firmly. "You were reading his posture, calculating the target's movement pattern. I saw you doing the math in your head. My coach used to do the same thing when I competed nationally." Maya's hands stilled on the pistol. For just a moment, her careful mask slipped, and Leila caught a glimpse of something deeper: knowledge, experience, maybe even pain. "Your coach sounds like a wise person," Maya said finally. That evening, Leila's curiosity got the better of her. She had access to personnel files through her communications role, and something about Maya Chun didn't add up. The woman was too calm, too knowledgeable, too comfortable around weapons to be just a maintenance specialist. The file was mostly standard information, basic training records, technical school completion, duty assignments. But buried in the electronic records was a single line that made Leila's blood run cold. Restricted Code Blue Coral Training. Conducted under Commander J. Westbrook, Clearance Level Delta. Leila stared at the screen. Commander James Westbrook. Everyone in Naval Special Warfare knew that name. The hero of Zamboanga. The operation with less than a 7% survival rate. One of the most decorated officers in recent naval history. What was a weapons maintenance specialist doing with training records connected to a legendary commander? Before she could dig deeper, the file locked her out, but the seed was planted. Maya Chun wasn't who she appeared to be, and Leila had a feeling that everyone on this base was about to find out exactly who they'd been underestimating. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Naval Base Coronado was hosting a distinguished visitor, and there would be a demonstration, a maritime precision shooting competition that had half the base's operators nervous and excited. None of them suspected that the quiet woman polishing their weapons was about to turn their world upside down. But Leila was beginning to understand that sometimes the most dangerous people were the ones nobody saw coming. The announcement came during morning formation, delivered by Captain Wilson himself. "Attention! We have the honor of hosting Commander James Westbrook tomorrow for a Special Operations Capabilities demonstration. This is an opportunity to showcase the exceptional training and expertise of Coronado's finest operators. A buzz of excitement rippled through the ranks. Commander Westbrook was a living legend, the architect of impossible victories, and the kind of sailor that other sailors told stories about. For most of them, this would be the chance of a lifetime. Lieutenant Commander Reed practically glowed with anticipation. This was his training facility, his show, his moment to shine in front of naval royalty. He spent the rest of the day making preparations, selecting his best shooters, and ensuring everything would be perfect. "Chun," he barked as Maya worked on adjusting a holographic sight. "I want every weapon system spotless tomorrow. And stay out of the way during the demonstration. This is for qualified personnel only, understood?" "Yes, sir." But Reed wasn't finished. Over the next few hours, his casual dismissiveness evolved into something more pointed, more cruel. Maybe it was the pressure of the upcoming demonstration. Or maybe he'd simply decided that having a failed marksman on his range was an embarrassment he couldn't tolerate. "You know what, Chun?" he said, loud enough for everyone in the armory to hear. "Maybe you should just stay home tomorrow. I don't want our distinguished visitor seeing someone who can't even qualify on basic weapons. It might reflect poorly on the unit." The room went quiet. This wasn't just casual teasing anymore. Reed was publicly humiliating her. Several sailors looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. The chain of command was sacred, and challenging a lieutenant commander wasn't something petty officers and seamen did lightly. Maya's hands never stopped moving as she cleaned the weapon in front of her. But Layla noticed her knuckles had gone white around the cleaning rod. "Actually," Reed continued, warming to his theme, "I'm thinking we need to have a conversation with the captain about your continued assignment to this section. Someone who can't handle basic marksmanship probably shouldn't be maintaining precision weapon systems." Now he'd crossed a line, threatening her job, her career, her ability to serve. That was more than casual harassment. That was destroying someone's livelihood out of petty cruelty. Maya set down her cleaning supplies and looked up at Reed for the first time in weeks. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made several people in the room shift uncomfortably. "Lieutenant Commander, I'll be here tomorrow as ordered. Maintaining equipment is my assigned duty, and I take my duties seriously." "Your duties," Reed sneered, "are whatever I say they are. And tomorrow, your duty is to stay invisible and let real operators do real work." That night, Maya sat alone in her quarters, staring at a framed photo of her grandfather. He had taught her that some battles chose you whether you wanted them or not. He'd also taught her that when those battles came, you fought them with honor, precision, and absolute commitment. She opened her locker and pulled out something she hadn't touched in months. A small wooden box containing a traditional Filipino tribal tattoo design, the mark of a warrior in her grandfather's ancestral village. Tomorrow she would no longer hide this part of herself. Commander Westbrook would be watching. And whether Reed liked it or not, Maya Chun was going to be there, ready to serve her country in whatever capacity was required. She'd spent months being invisible, accepting disrespect, tolerating humiliation. But tomorrow was different. Tomorrow she had a feeling her country might need her to be more than just a weapons maintenance specialist. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. "Real warriors don't boast about their skills, Maya, they just perform when performance matters. Tomorrow, performance would matter." And Lieutenant Commander Reed was about to learn that some people's silence wasn't weakness. It was discipline, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. The morning of the demonstration dawned clear and calm, perfect conditions for maritime operations. Maya arrived at the armory before anyone else as usual. But today she carried herself differently. The right sleeve of her uniform was rolled up slightly higher than regulation. revealing the edge of an intricate tattoo that wrapped around her forearm, a pattern of waves and hooks that told the story of her family's warrior lineage, normally hidden beneath her uniform. She set up her maintenance station at the edge of the pier, just as Reed had ordered, but her eyes kept drifting to the floating targets positioned at various distances across the harbor. By 0800 hours, Naval Base Coronado's best operators had assembled. The competition was elite. Chief Petty Officer Thompson, who'd won 3 Navy marksmanship competitions. Lieutenant Ramirez, fresh from advanced SEAL training. Senior Chief Petty Officer Kim, who'd served 3 deployments as a designated marksman. These were sailors whose entire careers revolved around precision shooting under difficult conditions. Reed strutted around like a peacock, inspecting equipment and barking orders. Remember, gentlemen, we're representing the entire special warfare community today. I expect nothing less than perfection. At 0957 hours, a black SUV pulled up to the pier. Commander James Westbrook stepped out, and every sailor snapped to attention. He was smaller than Maya had expected, maybe 5 feet 7 inches, with salt and pepper hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades making impossible decisions in hostile territory. His chest displayed ribbons that read like a history of American naval operations over the past 30 years. But what struck Maya most was his eyes. They swept across the assembled operators with professional assessment, then landed on her. For just a moment, so brief that anyone else would have missed it, something flickered in his expression. Recognition? Surprise? She couldn't tell. At ease, Westbrook said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from leading men through hell and bringing them home alive. I'm here to observe, not interfere. Please continue with your demonstration. The competition began. One by one, Carreno's finest took their positions on the small patrol boat and attempted the floating target shots. The water conditions were tricky, small swells creating a constant movement that challenged even experienced shooters. Chief Petty Officer Thompson went first. His shot hit 4 inches low and 3 inches right. Impressive by most standards, but not the bullseye everyone hoped for. Lieutenant Ramirez followed, managing to get closer but still missing the center ring by 3 inches. Each miss brought a tighter frown to Reed's face. This was supposed to be a showcase, not a demonstration of near misses. Senior Chief Kim stepped up for his attempt, and Maya found herself unconsciously analyzing his stance, his breathing, the way he was gripping the rifle. His shot went wide left. He hadn't accounted for the current shift that had occurred in the last 20 seconds. Challenging conditions, Commander Westbrook observed mildly, but Maya caught the undertone. He wasn't impressed. As the shooting continued, with sailor after sailor failing to achieve the precision that would truly honor their distinguished visitor, Maya noticed something else. Commander Westbrook's attention kept drifting to her. Not obviously, the man was too professional for that, but she'd spent enough time being invisible to recognize when someone was quietly observing her. Finally, after 8 attempts and 0 bullseyes, Reed was sweating despite the cool morning air. Sir, these are exceptionally difficult conditions. The swells have been unpredictable all morning, and Westbrook interrupted gently. I've seen shooting in conditions that would make today look like a calm day at an indoor range. The issue isn't the environment. The rebuke was polite but devastating. Reed's face went red, and Maya could see him scrambling for a way to salvage the situation. That's when Westbrook looked directly at her for the first time. Young lady, you've been watching very intently. What's your assessment of the shooting? Conditions? Every head on the pier turned to stare at Maya. Reed looked like he might have a stroke. Sir, she's just equipment maintenance. She doesn't. I asked her, Lieutenant Commander. Westbrook's tone was still mild, but it carried the weight of command that made Reed shut his mouth immediately. Maya stood slowly, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. Currents moving at 2-3 knots northeast, sir. But there's a cross pattern creating micro eddies every 75 seconds that push laterally. The platform angle is shifting approximately 1.7 degrees with each swell, and the morning light is creating a false horizon effect that's throwing off depth perception. A murmur ran through the assembled sailors. This was technical language that most of them had never heard from anyone below the rank of Chief Petty Officer. Reed looked like he'd been slapped. Commander Westbrook nodded slowly. Interesting assessment, very detailed. He paused, studying her face. What's your name, sailor? Petty Officer 3rd Class Maya Shin, sir. Well, Petty Officer Chun, since you seem to understand the conditions so well, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate proper technique. The suggestion hit the pier like a thunderbolt. Reed started to sputter an objection, but Westbrook's raised hand silenced him immediately. Maya felt every eye on the pier boring into her. This was the moment her grandfather had prepared her for without either of them knowing it. The moment when quiet competence would be tested against loud assumptions. I'd be honored, sir, she sighed quietly. Maya walked to the patrol boat with the deliberate calm of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. As she rolled her sleeve higher, revealing the full extent of the tribal tattoo, a hush fell over the pier. The design wasn't just decorative. To those who knew what to look for, it told a story, each pattern, each line representing skills mastered, battle survived, lessons learned. This wasn't a fashion statement. This was a warrior's chronicle, etched into skin. I'll be damned, whispered Senior Chief Kim, recognizing the cultural significance. That's a Pintado's warrior pattern, Reed found his voice. Sir, I have to protest. She's not certified on precision weapon systems. There are safety protocols, Lieutenant Commander. Commander Westbrook's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. I've made my decision. Stand down. Maya settled into position on the patrol boat, and immediately every experienced operator on the pier could see the difference. Her stance wasn't textbook. It was something more evolved, more adapted to the specific environment. She wasn't thinking about proper form. Proper form was simply who she was. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the movement of the boat beneath her, listening to the subtle sounds of water against hull that told her everything she needed to know about the conditions. When she opened them, her breathing had already settled into the rhythm her grandfather had taught her. Inhale, natural, pause, fire. Through the scope, the floating target looked impossibly small. But Maya wasn't seeing just a target. She was seeing current patterns, platform movement, the exact spot where physics and skill would intersect. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. Don't aim where it is. Aim where it's going to be. The crosshair settled. Her finger found the trigger. The natural pause in her breathing arrived. The rifle cracked. For a moment, absolute silence. Then someone in the distance began shouting coordinates back to the pier. Dead center. Perfect bullseye. The silence stretched another heartbeat, then exploded into chaos. Sailors were talking all at once, asking how that was possible, demanding to know who she really was. But Maya barely heard them. She was watching Commander Westbrook, who had stood up from his chair and was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Reed looked like he'd been hit by a truck. That was just luck. One shot doesn't mean, Commander. Westbrook interrupted, his voice carrying across the pier with absolute authority. That shot tells me everything I need to know. He stepped forward, and when he spoke again, his voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Petty Officer Maya Chun, formerly of Philippine Naval Special Operations Group, and the primary marksman responsible for saving 37 American and Filipino lives during the Zamboanga maritime interdiction. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every person on that pier knew about Zamboanga, the hostage rescue mission with a 7% survival rate. The operation that had become legend in special warfare circles. And they'd been mocking its hero. For months, Zamboanga, someone whispered. Jesus Christ, she's the ghost of Sulu Sea. Maya remained perfectly still, but her hands were trembling slightly. She'd spent 2 years trying to bury that part of her life, trying to find peace in maintenance work and invisible service. Now it was all coming back. Commander Westbrook continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. During the Zamboanga operation, Petty Officer Chun provided overwatch from a moving vessel while terrorist snipers had us pinned down. She eliminated 13 confirmed threats at ranges exceeding 600 yards, often in sea conditions that would challenge our most elite marksmen. Reed had gone completely pale. Around the pier, sailors were putting pieces together, remembering every joke they'd made, every dismissive comment, every time they treated her like she didn't belong. But the psychological cost, Westbrook continued, was significant. Taking that many lives, even enemy combatants, affected her deeply. Petty Officer Chun requested transfer to support roles. She wanted to continue serving, but in a way that built rather than destroyed. Maya finally stood, slinging the rifle. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. I didn't want anyone else to die because of my shooting. I'd had enough of taking lives. Why didn't you tell us? Petty Officer Vega asked, and for the first time since she'd known him, his voice held genuine respect instead of mockery. Because past achievements don't determine present worth, Maya replied. I wanted to be valued for who I am now, not who I used to be. Commander Westbrook nodded approvingly. That's exactly the attitude that made her exceptional in the first place. Humility combined with extraordinary skill. The transformation in the group was complete. These sailors finally understood that the quiet woman they dismissed possessed combat experience that exceeded their collective training. More than that, they understood they'd been privileged to work alongside genuine heroism and had been too blind to see it. Lieutenant Commander Reeves stood frozen, realizing that his career had just taken a hit from which it might never recover. He'd spent months humiliating a decorated war hero, and he'd done it in front of witnesses. But Maya wasn't looking at Reed anymore. She was looking at the sailors who had begun approaching her with genuine respect, asking technical questions, seeking guidance from someone they finally recognized as their superior in every way that mattered. The shot had been perfect, but more importantly, it had revealed the character of everyone present. Within hours, word of the demonstration had spread throughout Naval Base Coronado like wildfire. The story grew with each telling, but for once, the embellishments didn't diminish the truth. They simply couldn't match it. By evening, every sailor on the base knew that they'd been sharing their facility with a genuine war hero. Captain Wilson requested an immediate meeting with all personnel involved in the morning's events. The conference room felt smaller than usual as Reed, Maya, Commander Westbrook, and the witnessing sailors filed in. Wilson's expression was carefully neutral, but experienced sailors could read the storm brewing behind his eyes. Lieutenant Commander Reed, Wilson began without preamble. I've received several reports about your conduct regarding Petty Officer Chun. Would you care to explain why you've been publicly humiliating a decorated combat veteran? Reed's career flashed before his eyes. Sir, her personnel file didn't indicate. I had no knowledge of her combat experience. Her file, Commander Westbrook interjected, was classified for operational security reasons. But that doesn't explain why you thought it was appropriate to mock any sailor under your command, regardless of their background. Wilson leaned forward. Lieutenant Commander, I've also received reports that you threatened Petty Officer Chun's career and suggested she be removed from her position. Is this accurate? The room was silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Reed knew he was finished. Yes, sir. I made those statements. On what grounds? I believed she was unqualified for her position. Petty Officer Vega, who'd been one of Reed's most enthusiastic supporters in mocking Maya, cleared his throat. "Sir, if I may." Lieutenant Commander Reed never gave Petty Officer Chun a chance to demonstrate her abilities. None of us did. We assumed that because she was quiet and worked in maintenance, she was somehow lesser. The admission took courage, and Maya felt a grudging respect for the young sailor who was essentially confessing his own prejudice to save what remained of Reed's dignity. Captain Wilson turned to Maya. "Petty Officer Chun, why didn't you report this harassment through proper channels?" Maya had been dreading this question. "Sir, I was trying to serve quietly. I hoped that if I did my job well and stayed out of the way, the situation would resolve itself. That's not how the Navy works, sailor. When you're being mistreated, you have an obligation to speak up. Not just for yourself, but for every sailor who might face similar treatment in the future." Commander Westbrook spoke up. "Captain, if I may, Petty Officer Chun's approach to dealing with adversity has always been unique. During Zamboanga, she volunteered for the most dangerous position, provided overwatch for the entire operation, and then refused accommodation because she said she was just doing her job. She's never been comfortable with recognition." "Nevertheless," Wilson continued, "this situation is unacceptable. Lieutenant Commander Reed, you're relieved of your position as training supervisor effective immediately. You'll report to the executive officer for reassignment and counseling. Your fitness report will reflect today's revelations." Reed nodded stiffly. His career wasn't over, but it had just taken a devastating hit that would follow him for years. "Petty Officer Chun," Wilson continued, "I'm recommending you for immediate promotion to Petty Officer Second Class and reassignment to a position more appropriate for your experience level. We also need to discuss correcting your service record to properly reflect your combat experience." "Sir," Maya said carefully, "I requested the transfer to maintenance work. I'm content with my current position." Content or not, the Navy has invested significant resources in your training, and we're not utilizing your capabilities effectively. Commander Westbrook, do you have any recommendations?" Westbrook smiled slightly. "Actually, I do. The Naval Special Warfare Center has been looking for experienced personnel to develop new maritime shooting protocols. Someone with Petty Officer Chun's combination of combat experience and cultural perspective would be invaluable." The suggestion hung in the air. It would mean leaving Coronado, leaving the quiet maintenance work she'd found peaceful, and returning to a world that revolved around precision shooting. But it would also mean helping other sailors develop skills that might save their lives. Maya looked around the room at the faces of sailors who'd spent months dismissing her, who now looked at her with respect and something approaching awe. She thought about her grandfather's lessons about service, about using your gifts to help others. "I'd be honored to consider such an assignment, sir." As the meeting concluded, sailors filed out quietly, many stopping to offer Maya personal apologies. Vega lingered longest. "Ma'am, I owe you more than an apology. I was wrong about everything, and I'm ashamed of how I acted." Maya studied his face, seeing genuine remorse. "We all make assumptions, Vega. The question is what we do when we discover we're wrong. I'd like to learn from you, if you're willing to teach." "Everyone deserves a second chance to prove their character," she replied, "including me." That evening, as Maya cleaned her assigned weapon one last time in the armory, she reflected on the day's events. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to serve. But tonight she was content knowing that sometimes the most important battles were won not with bullets, but with quiet dignity and the courage to be exactly who you were meant to be. As she worked, her fingers traced the tattoo on her arm, the mark of her heritage, her training, her identity as a warrior. For months she had kept it hidden, ashamed of what it represented. Now she understood that some parts of ourselves can't be denied. They can only be channeled toward a greater purpose. Her grandfather had always told her that a warrior's greatest weapon wasn't in their hands but in their heart. Today, she finally understood what he meant. 3 weeks later, Maya found herself at Naval Special Warfare Center in Virginia Beach. Walking through the halls of the Maritime Operations Training Facility, she felt the building's quiet intensity. This was where the Navy's most elite operators came to push the boundaries of what was possible in maritime combat. Commander Elliot Drake, the center's training director, greeted her personally. A compact man with intelligent eyes and calloused hands that spoke of decades in special operations. He studied Maya carefully. "Petty Officer Chun," he said, using her new rank. "I'll be honest with you. When Commander Westbrook recommended you for this position, I was skeptical. Teaching advanced marksmanship isn't just about being able to shoot. It's about understanding how to transfer complex skills to operators who may never have your natural ability." They walked through the facility, past indoor ranges where sailors practiced with equipment that represented the cutting edge of military technology. Through soundproof glass, Maya watched instructors working with small groups, demonstrating techniques that she recognized from her grandfather's training and her own combat experience. "Your assignment," Drake continued, "will be developing curriculum for what we're calling the Maritime Precision Program. Too many of our advanced marksmen have excellent technical skills, but lack the psychological preparation for high stress shooting in maritime environments. Based on your combat record and your unique approach to service, we think you might have insights that could benefit the entire program." Maya paused at a window overlooking an outdoor range where operators were attempting shots from a simulated moving vessel. She could see immediately what they were doing wrong: rushing their breathing, fighting the platform movement instead of flowing with it, focusing on the target instead of the process. "Permission to ask a question, sir?" "Of course." "Are we training them to be better killers or better protectors?" Drake stopped walking. The question cut to the heart of something he'd been wrestling with throughout his career. "What's the difference?" "A killer focuses on destroying the target. A protector focuses on completing the mission. Sometimes that requires shooting. Sometimes it requires restraint. The difference is everything." For the first time since they'd met, Drake smiled. "Commander Westbrook said you'd have a unique perspective. I think he understated it." Over the following weeks, Maya threw herself into her new role with the same quiet intensity she brought to equipment maintenance. But now, instead of cleaning weapons, she was developing training protocols that emphasized decision-making alongside marksmanship. Her first class consisted of 12 operators, all experienced marksmen who'd been selected for advanced training. Lieutenant Sarah Reyes, recently returned from deployment, looked skeptical as Maya introduced herself. "I'm not here to teach you how to shoot," Maya began. "You already know how to shoot. I'm here to teach you how to think while you're shooting." She led them through exercises that had nothing to do with pulling triggers, reading environmental conditions, calculating the psychological pressure on both shooter and target, understanding when precision shooting was the right tool for a mission and when it wasn't. "Every shot has consequences beyond the immediate target," she explained during one session. "In combat, you're not just making holes in paper. You're making decisions that affect families, communities, entire operations. The technical skill is meaningless without the wisdom to use it appropriately." Lieutenant Reeves approached her after the third day of training. "Petty Officer, this isn't like any marksmanship course I've ever taken." "Good. How do you feel about that?" "Honestly, it's harder than I expected. You're making us think about things that most instructors never mention. Such as yesterday when you asked us to describe the difference between a justified shot and a necessary shot. I've been thinking about that for 18 hours. Maya nodded. "That's the point. Anyone can learn to hit a target at distance from a moving platform. But knowing when to take that shot and when to choose a different course of action, that's what separates good operators from exceptional ones." Word of her unconventional teaching methods spread quickly through the special warfare community. Other instructors began requesting copies of her curriculum. Senior officers who'd heard about the philosophical marksman started attending her sessions as observers. But the real validation came from her students. Operators who completed her program didn't just shoot more accurately, they made better decisions under pressure. They understood their role in the larger mission. They carried themselves with the quiet confidence that came from knowing they were prepared for whatever their country might ask of them. Late one evening, as Maya reviewed performance reports from her latest class, she found a handwritten note that had been slipped under her office door. Petty Officer Chun, my grandfather always said that the best teachers are the ones who change how you think, not just what you know. Thank you for helping me understand that being a sailor is about more than being a weapon. Petty Officer Leila Nasser. Maya smiled, recognizing the name. Layla had transferred to Virginia Beach specifically to take her course, having been one of the few people at Coronado who'd recognized there was more to Maya than met the eye. As she turned off her office lights and headed to her quarters, Maya reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. From fishing boats with her grandfather, through the hell of Zamboanga, to the quiet service of equipment, maintenance, and now to shaping the next generation of naval operators. Each phase had taught her something different about service, about sacrifice, about the responsibility that came with deadly skills. But perhaps the most important lesson was one her grandfather had taught her years ago. True strength wasn't about how much force you could bring to bear, but about knowing when force was necessary and when restraint was wiser. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, new opportunities to serve. But tonight she was content knowing that her grandfather's lessons lived on in every sailor she trained, and that sometimes the most important shots were the ones you chose not to take. 4 months into her assignment at Virginia Beach, Maya received an unexpected visitor. She was reviewing training schedules in her office when her assistant knocked on the door. "Petty Officer, there's a Commander Westbrook here to see you." Commander Westbrook entered with the same quiet authority she remembered from Coronado, but now his face carried a smile of genuine pride. "Petty Officer Chun, I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit. I was in the area and wanted to see how you were settling in." They walked through the facility together, observing classes in session. In one room, operators were practicing what Maya called mission-first shooting exercises that required them to accomplish specific objectives, where precision shooting was just one tool among many. "Your program has generated quite a bit of discussion in Pentagon circles," Westbrook observed. "Initial reports suggest that operators completing your training show 45% better decision-making under stress compared to traditional marksmanship programs." Maya watched through the observation window as one of her students, faced with a complex scenario, chose to reposition rather than take a difficult shot, exactly the kind of tactical thinking she'd been trying to instill. "Sir, I've been thinking about something you said at Coronado about the cost of combat and choosing when to pull the trigger and when to put the weapon down." "Go on." "I think I spent years believing that my value as a sailor was tied to my ability to eliminate threats at distance. But what I'm learning here is that my real value might be in teaching others to think before they shoot." Westbrook nodded slowly. "Zamboanga was necessary, Maya. What you did saved lives. But you're right. Teaching sailors to make better decisions might save even more lives in the long run." They paused outside a classroom where Lieutenant Reyes was leading a discussion about rules of engagement. The conversation was complex, nuanced, exactly the kind of thinking that separated professional operators from mere shooters. "There's something else," Westbrook continued. "The Navy is considering expanding your program fleet-wide. They want to integrate psychological preparation and ethical decision-making into all advanced marksmanship training." The implications hit Maya immediately. Her grandfather's lessons, learned on Filipino waters, refined through combat experience, and tempered by the wisdom that came from understanding the true cost of violence, would become part of how America trained its warriors. Sir, that's an incredible responsibility. Yes, it is. But you've already proven you can handle incredible responsibilities. The question is whether you're ready to step into a larger role. We're talking about a promotion to Petty Officer First Class and assignment to head a new department, Maritime Ethics and Precision Operations. That evening, Maya sat in her small apartment staring at the framed photo of her grandfather that had traveled with her from post to post. He died 1 year after Zamboanga, proud of his granddaughter but worried about the weight she carried from that operation. Now she wondered what he'd think about this new opportunity. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Leela Nasser. "Ma'am, saw the news about the program expansion. My whole team is requesting your training. You're changing how we think about being sailors." More messages followed. Operators from her classes sharing stories about how her teaching had influenced their decisions in the field. Officers reporting improved performance from personnel who'd completed her program. Even international allies expressing interest in her curriculum. The fishing boat captain's granddaughter had found her true calling, and it wasn't behind a rifle scope. The next morning, Maya found herself back at the outdoor range where she'd first demonstrated her abilities months earlier. But instead of lying prone behind a rifle, she stood behind a group of young sailors, teaching them to read the water, understand their equipment, and most importantly, understand themselves. "Remember," she told them, "precision isn't just about hitting what you aim at. It's about choosing the right target, at the right time, for the right reasons. Your accuracy with a weapon is meaningless if you don't have accuracy in your judgment." A young ensign raised her hand. "Petty Officer, how do you know when you're making the right decision in a high-stress situation?" Maya smiled, hearing her grandfather's voice in the question. "You prepare beforehand by thinking through scenarios, understanding your values, and practicing good decision-making when the stakes are low. When the pressure hits, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall back on your level of preparation." As the class continued, Maya noticed movement at the edge of the range. Lieutenant Commander Reed from Coronado was standing there, apparently having traveled to Virginia Beach specifically to see her. When the training session ended, he approached hesitantly. "Petty Officer, I know I have no right to ask for your time, but I was hoping we could talk." They walked to a quiet area overlooking the training facilities. Reed looked older, humbled by the events that had cost him his position and damaged his career. "I came to apologize," he said simply. "Not just for how I treated you, but for what I failed to learn from you. I spent months working alongside someone who could have made me a better sailor, a better leader, a better person. Instead, I let my prejudices blind me to an opportunity that will never come again." Maya studied his face, seeing genuine remorse. "We all make mistakes, Lieutenant Commander. The question is what we do with the lessons they teach us. I've requested transfer to a training unit. I want to learn to teach sailors the way you do, with respect, with understanding, with focus on making them better people as well as better warriors." "That's a worthy goal," Reed hesitated, then continued. "Ma'am, there's something else. Petty Officer Vega sends his regards. He completed SWCC training last month, top of his class. He said your example taught him that quiet confidence was more valuable than loud boasting." The conversation reminded Maya of something her grandfather had often said: "Influence spreads in ways you never expect." The lessons she'd learned in the coastal waters of the Philippines were now shaping sailors across the Navy, creating ripples that would extend far beyond anything she could directly observe. As the sun set over Virginia Beach, Maya made her decision about the promotion and expanded role. She would accept, not because she craved recognition or authority, but because her country needed sailors who understood that true strength came from wisdom, restraint, and the courage to make difficult decisions under pressure. That night she wrote a letter to her grandmother, as she did every month since her grandfather's passing. "Lola, remember how grandfather used to say that the most important shot was often the one you didn't take? I finally understand what he meant. Teaching sailors to think clearly, act with honor, and choose their battles wisely. That might be the most important marksmanship lesson of all. The water lessons he taught me aren't just living on in me anymore. They're living on in every sailor I train, and they'll live on in everyone those sailors train in turn. His legacy isn't just in the shots I made at Zamboanga. It's in all the unnecessary shots that won't be taken, because sailors learned to think before they acted. I think he'd be proud of that." 6 months later, when the Navy officially announced the new Department of Maritime Ethics and Precision Operations, the press release included a quote from its director, Petty Officer First Class Maya Shun. "Our goal isn't to create better killers. It's to create better sailors. Sailors who understand that true precision extends far beyond marksmanship. It includes precision in judgment, precision in decision-making, and precision in understanding when force is necessary and when restraint is wiser." The quiet woman who had once been dismissed as just equipment maintenance had become one of the most influential trainers in the modern Navy, but she still began each day the same way she had at Coronado, with a moment of silent reflection, honoring traditions greater than herself. Some heroes charge into battle. Others stand quietly at the edge of shooting ranges, teaching young sailors that the most important weapon they carry isn't their rifle, it's their judgment. Both kinds of heroes serve with honor. Both kinds of heroes make their country proud. And sometimes, if they're very lucky, both kinds of heroes get to see the lasting impact of lessons learned from a fishing boat captain who understood that true strength always comes from within. Excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to be ready when called upon. Another year passed, and Maya's program had expanded beyond anything she could have imagined. What began as a specialized course for elite operators had grown into a fundamental component of naval combat training. Her curriculum was being taught at facilities across the country, and international partners had begun sending their personnel to learn her methods. On a crisp autumn morning, Maya stood on the deck of the USS Nimitz, watching as a new class of sailors prepared for a maritime precision exercise. These weren't special operators. They were ordinary sailors learning extraordinary skills. Admiral Catherine Williams, the newly appointed Chief of Naval Operations, had come specifically to observe Maya's program in action. At 52, Williams had broken numerous barriers throughout her career, becoming the first woman to hold her current position. She watched intently as Maya guided the sailors through their pre-shooting meditation, another unconventional technique that had raised eyebrows initially but produced remarkable results. "Breathe with the movement of the ship," Maya instructed them. "Don't fight the platform, become part of it. Your body, the weapon, the vessel, they should move as one." After the demonstration, which resulted in an 87% accuracy rate, unprecedented for sailors of this experience level, Admiral Williams pulled Maya aside. "Petty Officer Chen, in 30 years of naval service, I've never seen anything quite like this. You're not just teaching them to shoot. You're teaching them a new way of approaching challenges. That's the intention, ma'am. Walk with me." As they moved along the carrier's deck, Williams spoke candidly. "The Pentagon is establishing a new joint task force focused on ethical warfare in the digital age. As warfare evolves, the lines between kinetic and non-kinetic operations are blurring. The principles you've been teaching, precision, restraint, ethical decision-making, they apply across domains." Maya listened carefully, already seeing where this was heading. "We need someone who understands both the technical aspects and the human dimensions. Someone who can translate complex ethical frameworks into practical training. I want you to consider taking on this challenge. With respect, Admiral, I'm not qualified for a joint task force position. My experience is limited to maritime operations." Williams smiled. 5 years ago, you were cleaning weapons at Coronado. Now you're running the most innovative training program in the Navy. I'd say you have a history of exceeding qualifications." The offer was both flattering and terrifying. This would mean stepping even further from her comfort zone, working across service branches, helping shape policy that would affect how America conducted operations around the world. "I need time to consider it, ma'am." "Of course, but don't take too long. The world isn't waiting." That evening, Maya found herself in the carrier's small chapel, seeking the quiet reflection she needed. The enormity of the opportunity before her was overwhelming. Her grandfather had taught her to shoot on fishing boats. Now she was being asked to help guide how America's military thought about the future of warfare itself. A soft voice interrupted. Her thoughts. "Penny for your thoughts, Petty Officer." Maya turned to see Master Chief Petty Officer Jackson, the Nimitz's senior enlisted leader, a legend in his own right with 30 years of service. "Just trying to make sense of things." "Master Chief, I heard the Admiral offered you quite the opportunity." "Word travels fast. On a carrier? Faster than light." He sat down beside her. "You know, when I was a young sailor, my chief told me something I never forgot. He said, 'Jackson, some people spend their whole careers trying to climb high enough to make a difference. Others discover they can make a difference right where they are.'" He paused, letting the words sink in. "You've already proven you can make a difference, Chen. The question isn't whether you're qualified for this new role. The question is whether this new role is where you can make the greatest difference." Maya thought about the sailors she'd trained, about the lives that might be saved not just by their improved accuracy, but by their improved judgment. She thought about her grandfather's lessons about responsibility and service. How do you know where you can make the greatest difference? The Master Chief smiled. "You don't. You just make the best decision you can with the information you have, and you trust that your training will carry you through. Sound familiar?" Maya couldn't help but laugh. He was quoting her own curriculum back to her. "Thank you, Master Chief." 2 weeks later, Maya stood in the Pentagon's Hall of Heroes, surrounded by portraits of Medal of Honor recipients, silent witnesses to the highest ideals of military service. Admiral Williams was briefing her on the Joint Ethics and Precision Warfare Task Force she would help lead. "Your first assignment will be developing a framework for maritime drone operations. The technology is advancing faster than our ethical guidelines. We need to ensure our operators understand not just how to use these systems, but when and why." Maya nodded, already formulating approaches. "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Always. This task force will face resistance. Many will see ethics as a constraint on operational effectiveness rather than an enhancement." Williams smiled. "Which is precisely why we need someone who can demonstrate otherwise. Your program has already proven that ethical considerations improve decision-making and operational outcomes. Now we need to extend that thinking across domains." As they concluded their meeting, the Admiral handed Maya a small box. "Before you go, this came through officially this morning." Inside was the insignia of a Chief Petty Officer, the promotion making her one of the youngest chiefs in the Navy. "Congratulations, Chief Chen. Your grandfather would be proud." As Maya pinned on her new rank, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the fishing boats of her childhood to the Pentagon's corridors of power. From being dismissed as just maintenance to helping shape the future of warfare ethics. Her grandfather had taught her that a true warrior's strength came not from the weapon they wielded, but from the wisdom that guided when to use it. Now she would help ensure that wisdom guided not just individual sailors, but entire operational frameworks. That evening, Maya called her grandmother in the Philippines. "Lola, I have news." As she shared the details of her promotion and new assignment, she could hear the pride in her grandmother's voice, and beneath it, The certainty that this was exactly the path her grandfather would have wanted for her. He always said you would find your way, her grandmother told her. That your quiet strength would speak louder than any weapon. Later, as Maya stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial watching the sunset paint the reflecting pool in gold and crimson, she thought about all the sailors whose lives she had touched, and who had touched hers in return. Lieutenant Commander Reed, finding redemption through teaching. Petty Officer Vega, learning the value of quiet confidence. Layla Nasser, recognizing worth beyond appearances. Each connection represented a lesson learned, a perspective changed, a life potentially saved through better decisions in critical moments. The tattoo on her arm, once hidden in shame, now served as a visible reminder of her heritage and her journey. It told a story not just of what she had been, but of what she had become. Not just a warrior, but a teacher of warriors. Not just a marksman, but a guardian of the principles that gave marksmanship meaning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to serve. But tonight she was content knowing that excellence didn't need to announce itself. It just needed to be ready when called upon, and she was ready. The first months at the Pentagon challenged Maya in ways her previous assignments never had. The Joint Ethics and Precision Warfare Task Force brought together personnel from across service branches, Army Rangers with their direct approach, Air Force officers with their technical precision, Marine Corps operators with their aggressive, tactical mindset, and Coast Guard personnel with their humanitarian focus. Maya's first inter-service briefing tested her in ways combat never had. Standing before a room of senior officers, many with decades more experience, she felt the weight of skepticism heavy in the air. Chief Petty Officer Chun began an Army colonel with 3 combat tours and a permanently furrowed brow. Your program has impressive results in naval applications. But ground combat has different ethical considerations than maritime operations. How do you propose to bridge that gap? The question wasn't just professional. It was a challenge to her authority, her experience, her very presence in this room. 6 months ago, she'd been teaching sailors on a carrier deck. Now she was attempting to reshape how America's military thought about warfare ethics across all domains. Maya took a breath, centered herself as she'd taught her students to do before a difficult shot. Colonel, you're absolutely right. Each operational environment presents unique challenges. But the core principle remains consistent across domains. Precision isn't just about hitting what you aim at. It's about choosing the right target, at the right time, for the right reasons. She pulled up a slide showing comparative data from Army and Navy precision operations. What we've discovered is that operators who understand the ethical frameworks underpinning their mission make better tactical decisions under stress, regardless of environment. A Ranger in Kandahar and a SEAL in the South China Sea face different tactical scenarios, but the fundamental question is the same. Does this action serve the mission and uphold our values? By the end of that first meeting, she hadn't won everyone over, but she'd earned enough respect to continue the work. Over the following weeks, she immersed herself in understanding the ethical challenges specific to each branch, building relationships with operators who could help translate her principles into domain-specific applications. Late one evening, as Maya worked alone in her Pentagon office, a knock came at her door. General Michael Harris, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, stood in her doorway. At 58, with silver hair and the bearing of someone who had made life or death decisions for decades, his presence commanded immediate attention. "Chief Chun, do you have a moment?" "Of course, sir." Harris closed the door behind him and took a seat. "I've been reviewing your work with the task force. Impressive, particularly your approach to drone warfare ethics." "Thank you, sir. But I have a question that's been bothering me. Your background is unique. Elite marksmanship, combat experience, then a deliberate step back from trigger-pulling roles. Now you're shaping policy that will determine when and how we engage in lethal force. I'm curious about your personal perspective on this evolution." Maya considered the question carefully. This wasn't just professional curiosity. This was a senior military leader trying to understand the philosophical foundation of what might become doctrine. "Sir, my grandfather taught me that a weapon is merely a tool. Its value, its morality, if you will, depends entirely on how and why it's used. At Zamboanga, I used my skills to save lives, but each shot I took also ended a life. I've never forgotten that dual reality." She paused, organizing her thoughts. The future of warfare is becoming increasingly remote, increasingly automated. My concern is that as we create distance between the operator and the impact, we risk losing the moral weight of those decisions. My goal with this task force is to ensure that even as technology evolves, the human understanding of what it means to take action in the name of our country remains central to every decision. Harris nodded slowly. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man. He was, sir." "We're facing a decision point with autonomous weapon systems. Congress is pushing for fewer restrictions, citing operational advantages. The intelligence community wants broader authorities. The State Department is concerned about international precedent. And here we sit, trying to balance effectiveness with ethics." Maya recognized the weight of the conversation. This wasn't just theoretical anymore. "What's your assessment, Chief?" The question hung in the air, a senior military leader asking a recently promoted chief petty officer for guidance on one of the most consequential military ethics questions of their time. "Sir, technology always outpaces ethics. That's been true since the first human picked up a rock as a weapon. Our challenge isn't to restrict technology, but to ensure that our ethical frameworks evolve alongside it. Autonomous systems have tremendous potential to reduce risk to our personnel, but if we remove human judgment from lethal decision-making, we risk losing something essential to what makes us different from those we fight." Harris studied her face. "You've given this considerable thought. It's why I accepted this position, sir. The Secretary of Defense is convening a special committee on autonomous weapon systems next week. I'd like you to present your framework. It's time these discussions included voices like yours, people who understand both the tactical reality and the ethical implications." As he left, Maya sat back in her chair, the magnitude of the opportunity and responsibility settling on her shoulders. From cleaning weapons at Coronado to potentially shaping national policy on warfare ethics, the journey seemed impossible, yet here she was. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lieutenant Reyes, now leading her own training unit. "Just wanted you to know your program saved lives today. Team in redacted chose not to take a shot because of the collateral risk assessment protocols you developed. Found a better approach. No casualties, mission accomplished. You're making a difference." "Chief," Maya smiled at the message. "Sometimes the most important impact came not from what you did yourself, but from what you taught others to do, or not do." The day of the Secretary's special committee arrived with tension hanging in the air. Maya had spent days preparing her presentation, distilling complex ethical frameworks into clear principles that could guide policy without hampering operational effectiveness. The committee included legislators, military leaders, ethicists, technologists, and international law experts, an intimidating audience for someone who had spent most of her career in operational roles rather than policy discussions. As she waited her turn to present, Maya noticed a familiar face enter the room. Commander Westbrook, now sporting the insignia of a captain, nodded slightly in recognition as he took a seat in the back row. When her name was called, Maya approached the podium with the same calm focus she'd once brought to the shooting platform. Her presentation was concise, built around a framework she called the preservation principle, the idea that autonomous systems should be designed not just to accomplish military objectives, but to preserve human dignity. international norms, and America's moral standing. The question isn't whether these systems can make targeting decisions, she explained. The technology already exists. The question is whether they should, and if so, within what constraints. Our proposal establishes 3 tiers of autonomy, each with appropriate human oversight based not on technical limitations, but on ethical considerations. As questions came from the committee, Maya found herself drawing on every aspect of her experience, her grandfather's lessons about responsibility, the hard-earned wisdom from Zamboanga, the insights gained from teaching others. A senior senator leaned forward. "Chief Chun, your framework is impressive in theory, but let me pose a practical scenario. Our intelligence indicates a high-value target in a denied area. An autonomous platform could reach the target when human operators couldn't. Under your framework, would that operation be permitted?" Maya didn't hesitate. "Senator, under our proposed framework, the autonomous system could navigate to the target area and gather intelligence independently. It could identify potential targets based on predetermined criteria. But the decision to employ lethal force would require human authorization based on that real-time intelligence. The system extends our reach without surrendering our responsibility." The debate continued for hours, with perspectives ranging from those who wanted few restrictions on autonomous systems to those who advocated banning them entirely. Through it all, Maya maintained her central position. Technology should serve human values, not replace human judgment. As the session concluded, the Secretary of Defense approached her. "Chief Chun, that was one of the most thoughtful presentations I've heard on this topic. We'll be incorporating elements of your framework into our official position for the upcoming UN convention." The acknowledgement was gratifying, but what meant more to Maya was the brief conversation that followed with Captain Westbrook. "You've come a long way from cleaning rifles at Coronado," he observed with a smile. "Some days it doesn't feel like it, sir. I'm still trying to help people understand when to shoot and when not to. The difference is now you're doing it at a scale that could affect generations of warfare. Your grandfather's lessons about restraint and precision are about to become national policy." The realization was both humbling and empowering. The quiet wisdom passed down from a Filipino fishing boat captain to his granddaughter was now shaping how the world's most powerful military thought about the ethical use of force. In the months that followed, Maya found herself increasingly at the intersection of technology, ethics, and policy. Her task force's recommendations were being implemented across service branches. The training programs she developed were being adapted for everything from drone operations to cyber warfare. One rainy Tuesday morning, Admiral Williams called Maya to her office. "Chief Chun, I have an unusual request. The Naval Academy has asked for someone to deliver a guest lecture on warfare ethics to their senior class. Normally we'd send a senior officer, but they specifically requested you." Maya was surprised. "Me, ma'am, I'm not an academic. I don't have the credentials these midshipmen would expect. What you have is more valuable, genuine moral authority earned through service. These young officers are about to enter a military, facing unprecedented ethical challenges. They need to hear from someone who has navigated these waters successfully." 2 weeks later, Maya stood before 300 midshipmen at Annapolis, their young faces representing the future of naval leadership. Looking out at them, she was struck by their eagerness, their potential, and the enormous responsibility they would soon bear. "The most important weapon you'll ever wield isn't in your hands," she began. "It's in your mind, your judgment, your values, your understanding of what it means to serve with honor." She shared stories from her own journey, not just the dramatic moments like Zamboanga, but the quiet daily decisions that shaped her character and career. She spoke about her grandfather's lessons, about the importance of knowing when not to act, about finding strength in restraint. "Technology will continue to evolve," she told them. "The weapon systems you command will be more powerful, more precise, more autonomous than anything we've seen before. But the fundamental questions remain the same. Does this action serve our mission? Does it uphold our values? Does it reflect who we are as a nation? After the lecture, a young woman approached her, a senior midshipman with determination in her eyes. "Chief Chun, your presentation changed how I think about my future service. Everyone talks about what we can do with new technology. You're the first person who's made me really think about what we should do. That distinction will serve you well, midshipman." "Garcia, ma'am, Alexandra Garcia. Remember that distinction, Midshipman Garcia. It will guide you when technical manuals and regulations can't." As Maya left Annapolis that evening, she felt a sense of completion. Her grandfather had passed his wisdom to her. She had shared it with sailors and operators throughout her career. Now it would live on in a new generation of leaders. Her phone rang as she reached her car. The caller ID showed a Pentagon number she didn't recognize. "Chief." "Chun speaking." "Chief, this is General Harris's office. The General requests your presence at a classified briefing tomorrow morning at 700. The situation involves potential deployment of autonomous systems in the South China Sea. He specifically asked that you be there to provide ethical framework assessment." The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders once again. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real-world application of the principles she'd helped develop, principles that would determine how America employed force in a volatile situation. "I'll be there, sir." That night, Maya sat on her apartment balcony looking up at the stars, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From the quiet girl who cleaned weapons while others mocked her to a trusted voice in national security decisions. The path hadn't been easy or straight, but each step had prepared her for what came next. She thought about her grandfather, about the lessons he'd taught her on those fishing boats, lessons about patience, about precision, about responsibility. She wondered what he would think of her now, helping shape how America conducted warfare in the 21st century. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lieutenant Commander Reed, the man who had once dismissed her at Coronado and now ran a training unit implementing her ethical frameworks. "Just heard you're involved in the South China Sea situation. Whatever you decide, know that there are thousands of us out here who trust your judgment. You taught us to think before we shoot. Now you're teaching the whole military the same lesson." Maya smiled at the message. Sometimes the path of greatest impact wasn't the one you planned. Sometimes it revealed itself through challenges and obstacles that seemed, at the time, to be holding you back. Her tattoo caught the moonlight, the mark of a warrior from her grandfather's village, a symbol of responsibility and service that she had once hidden and now wore proudly. It reminded her that strength came in many forms, and the quietest strength was often the most enduring. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new responsibilities. But tonight she was at peace knowing that the lessons of the past were guiding the decisions of the present and shaping the possibilities of the future. Excellence didn't need to announce itself. It just needed to be ready when called upon. And she was ready. The South China Sea briefing brought together the nation's top military and intelligence leaders in the Pentagon's secure conference room. Maya, despite her recent prominence in policy circles, felt the weight of being the junior-most person at the table. Admiral Williams nodded reassuringly as Maya took her seat. The situation was tense. An American surveillance drone had been damaged in international waters, and intelligence suggested foreign autonomous vessels were operating in the area with uncertain capabilities and intentions. The President has authorized deployment of our new Poseidon autonomous surface vessels for protection of assets and intelligence gathering, explained the National Security Advisor. The question before us is what operational parameters to set. All eyes turned to General Harris. Before we make that determination, I've asked Chief Chun to provide an ethical framework assessment. Chief, Maya stood, aware of the gravity of the moment. This wasn't a theoretical exercise or a training scenario. This was real-world application of principles that would determine how America responded to a volatile situation. Sir, based on the intelligence presented, this scenario falls under Tier 2 of our autonomous systems framework. Poseidon vessels can be deployed for intelligence gathering, defensive positioning, and non-kinetic countermeasures without direct human oversight. However, any potential use of force should remain under human authorization, with the autonomous system providing decision support rather than independent action. The Director of Naval Intelligence frowned. Chief, given the communications limitations in the area and the speed at which this situation could evolve, requiring human authorization for all use of force could put our assets at significant risk. It was a valid concern. Maya had anticipated it. Director, our framework accounts for this. We recommend pre-authorized defensive protocols within strictly defined parameters. The system can respond to immediate threats based on clear criteria, but escalatory actions remain under human control. This balances operational needs with ethical considerations. The discussion continued for hours, weighing operational requirements against ethical constraints, immediate security needs against long-term precedent. Throughout, Maya provided the moral clarity her position demanded, not arguing against the use of force when necessary, but ensuring that such use remained consonant with American values and international norms. When the final operational parameters were set, they reflected the balanced approach Maya had advocated, empowering the technology to extend American capabilities while preserving human judgment for the most consequential decisions. As the meeting concluded, the Secretary of Defense addressed her directly. Chief Chun, your contribution today wasn't just valuable for this operation. It's helping establish how we'll approach these questions for years to come. When history looks back at how America navigated the autonomous warfare era, this framework will be seen as a turning point. Later that evening, as Maya walked along the Potomac, reflecting on the day's decisions, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed a number with a Philippine country code. Hello, Maya? It's Tomas, your grandmother's neighbor. Mayo's heart tightened. Is Lola okay? She's in the hospital. Nothing critical, just her heart acting up again. But she's asking for you. Within hours, Maya had arranged emergency leave and booked a flight to Manila. As her plane soared over the Pacific, she thought about the synchronicity of this return, heading back to the Philippines not as a young woman running from her past, but as someone who had integrated that past into a purposeful present. The coastal hospital where her grandmother was recovering overlooked the same waters where Maya had learned to shoot as a child. As she entered the room, she found her grandmother looking smaller than she remembered, but with the same fierce light in her eyes. Apo, her grandmother said, using the Tagalog term of endearment. You came. Of course I came, Lola. They talked for hours about Maya's work, about family memories, about her grandfather's legacy. As twilight painted the water in shades of gold and crimson, her grandmother took her hand. Your grandfather always said you would find your own way to carry our traditions. He would be so proud to see what you've become. I hope so, Lola. Everything I do is built on what he taught me. Her grandmother smiled. He didn't just teach you to shoot, Maya. He taught you to see the water, the wind, the target. But more importantly, to see the consequences. Beyond the target, that was always his greatest gift. During her 2 weeks in the Philippines, Maya reconnected with her roots. She visited the fishing village where her grandfather had grown up, spoke with elders who remembered him, and even took a young cousin out on a boat to teach the same skills her grandfather had taught her. One evening, as she sat on the beach, watching local fishermen return with their catch, an elderly man approached her. You are Mateo Chun's granddaughter, yes? The one who serves in the American Navy? I am, he nodded respectfully. Your grandfather was a great warrior in his time. But what made him wise was knowing when to set down his weapon. The village still tells stories of how he chose to become a teacher rather than continue as a fighter. The words resonated deeply. Maya had made a similar choice after Zamboanga, stepping back from direct combat roles to teach others. And now, in her policy work, she was helping an entire military think more deeply about when and how to use force. When she returned to Washington, Maya brought something new with her, not just renewed connection to her heritage, but deeper conviction about her purpose. The wisdom of her grandfather's fishing village wasn't opposed to modern warfare technology. It was exactly what that technology needed to remain ethical. Admiral Williams welcomed her back with news. While you were away, the Joint Chiefs formally adopted your ethical framework for autonomous systems as official doctrine. And there's more. The Secretary of Defense has recommended you for the position of Special Advisor for Ethical Warfare Integration. The position would be a significant promotion, unprecedented for someone of her rank and age. It would place her at the center of how America navigated the increasingly complex intersection of technology, ethics, and warfare. This isn't just about your technical expertise, Chief, Admiral Williams explained. It's about your moral authority. You've earned the trust of operators because you've been one. You've earned the respect of ethicists because you think deeply about these issues. And you've earned the confidence of leadership because you provide clarity in complex situations. As Maya considered the opportunity, she received an unexpected visitor. Midshipman Alexandra Garcia, the young woman she'd met at Annapolis, had graduated and been commissioned as an ensign. She'd requested Maya as her mentoring officer. Your lecture changed my path, Chief Chun, Garcia explained during their first meeting. I've requested assignment to the new Ethical Warfare Integration Unit. I want to help build systems that extend our capabilities without compromising our values. Looking at the young officer's determined face, Maya saw the future, not just her own future, but the future of a military that understood strength came from moral clarity as much as technological superiority. She accepted the special advisor position and immediately began building a team that reflected diverse perspectives, operators who understood tactical realities, ethicists who grappled with moral complexities, technologists who pushed the boundaries of what was possible. At their first team meeting, Maya shared her vision. Our job isn't to restrict what our military can do. It's to ensure that everything we do reflects who we are as a nation. Technology gives us new capabilities every day. Our task is to ensure those capabilities serve our values, not just our objectives. Over the following year, Maya's influence expanded beyond the military into broader national security discussions. Her framework for ethical autonomous operations was being studied by allies, adapted by other government agencies, and even incorporated into international dialogues about the future of warfare. On the anniversary of her grandfather's death, Maya visited Arlington National Cemetery. Though he wasn't buried there, the quiet dignity of the place seemed appropriate for honoring his memory. As she stood among the perfectly aligned headstones, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the fishing boats of her childhood to the Pentagon's policy chambers, from being mocked for cleaning weapons to shaping how those weapons would be used for generations to come, the path had never been straight, but each step had been necessary. Her phone buzzed with a notification. The president had just signed the Autonomous Systems Ethics Framework legislation that codified into law many of the principles Maya had helped develop. Her grandfather's wisdom, passed to her on those Filipino waters, was now woven into the fabric of American military doctrine. As she left the cemetery, Maya noticed a group of naval cadets on a field trip, their young faces solemn as they absorbed the weight of service and sacrifice represented by each headstone. One day, these young people would make decisions guided by frameworks she had helped create. The responsibility was enormous, But so was the opportunity, the chance to ensure that even as warfare evolved, the human values at its core remained constant. The chance to transform lessons learned on fishing boats into principles that would guide the most powerful military in history. That evening, as Maya added another entry to the journal she'd kept since Coronado, she wrote words her grandfather had often told her: "The true mark of a warrior isn't the targets they hit. It's the wisdom to know which targets matter, which battles to fight, and which victories truly serve the greater good." Excellence didn't need to announce itself. It just needed to be ready when called upon. And thanks to a quiet woman once dismissed for merely cleaning weapons, a new generation of warriors would be ready, not just with technology that extended their reach, but with ethical frameworks that ensured that reach served humanity's highest ideals. That evening, as Maya walked along the National Mall, watching the sunset paint the monuments in gold and amber, she reflected on the continuing evolution of her work. What had begun as practical shooting skills taught by her grandfather on fishing boats had expanded into training programs, military doctrine, international accords, government policy, and now potentially therapeutic approaches for veterans. At each stage, the core principles remained the same: respect for human dignity, precision in judgment, responsibility for consequences, and the wisdom to know when action served purpose and when restraint was the greater strength. These weren't just military values or technological ethics. They were human values applicable across domains, cultures, and generations. Her phone buzzed with a message from the Philippine ambassador. The International Accord on Autonomous Systems passed with 157 nations signing. Your grandfather's wisdom now protects people he never met in countries he never visited. This is what it means to leave a true legacy. As darkness fell over Washington, Maya thought about all the connections that had brought her to this moment. The grandfather who taught her to shoot on fishing boats, the sailors who had underestimated her at Coronado, the officers who had recognized her potential, the leaders who had given her opportunities to expand her influence, and the countless individuals whose lives had been touched by the framework she developed. None of it had been planned. Her path had never been straight or conventional. Yet each step, each challenge, each opportunity had been necessary to bring her to where she could make her greatest contribution. The following morning, Maya was scheduled to speak to a graduating class of engineering students at MIT, young people who would build the next generation of technologies that would shape human society. As she prepared her remarks, she returned to the wisdom her grandfather had shared with her on those Filipino fishing boats. The tools we create are only as wise as the hearts that guide them. Technology without compassion is power without purpose. Our greatest strength isn't in what we can build, but in understanding why we build it and how it serves life. She thought about how to translate these principles for young innovators who would face ethical challenges her grandfather could never have imagined: artificial general intelligence, human enhancement technologies, digital consciousness, and capabilities beyond current comprehension. The fundamentals, she realized, remained unchanged. The details of application would evolve, but the core wisdom about responsibility, judgment, and human values would remain as relevant in the digital age as they had been on those fishing boats decades ago. As she finalized her speech, Maya glanced at the tattoo on her arm, the mark of her heritage, her journey, her identity as someone who bridged worlds and traditions. What had once been hidden in shame was now a visible reminder of the wisdom that had guided her path. Her grandfather had taught her that true strength didn't announce itself with noise and bravado. It revealed itself in moments that mattered, in decisions that honored something greater than self-interest, in wisdom passed from generation to generation. Excellence didn't need to announce itself. It just needed to be ready when called upon. And thanks to a quiet woman once dismissed for merely cleaning weapons, a woman whose tattoo had made a Navy SEAL drop his gun in recognition of who she truly was, a new generation was learning that the most powerful technology would always Be guided by the most enduring wisdom, the wisdom to use power with precision, purpose, and profound responsibility. As Maya prepared to address the engineers who would build tomorrow's world, she carried with her not just the technical knowledge of modern warfare systems, but the timeless wisdom of a Filipino fishing boat captain who had understood that true mastery began with mastery of oneself. The journey that had begun with a young woman silently cleaning weapons while others mocked her had expanded into a mission that would shape how humanity navigated the most consequential technological revolution in history. Not through force or authority, but through the quiet power of wisdom passed down, lessons learned, and values honored across generations. In the end, Maya reflected, that was her grandfather's greatest legacy, not the shooting skills he had taught her, but the understanding that those skills gained meaning only when guided by wisdom, compassion, and clear moral purpose. In a world of increasingly autonomous systems, these human qualities would remain the true source of strength and the foundation of ethical progress. The next morning, as Maya addressed the engineering students, she saw in their eager faces the future taking shape, a future that would be defined not just by what these young people could build, but by the wisdom that would guide their innovation. The greatest challenge you will face, she told them, isn't technical but ethical. Not what can be built, but what should be built. Not what technology can do, but what it should do. The code you write will encode values as well as functions. Make sure those values reflect the world you want to create. As she spoke, she noticed a young woman in the front row, of Filipino descent, based on her features, watching with particular intensity. In her eyes, Maya recognized something familiar, the same quiet determination, the same careful observation, the same potential waiting to be recognized and developed. After the lecture, the young woman approached her. Director Chun, my name is Isabella Santos. My grandfather was a fisherman in Mindanao. He taught me that observation was the beginning of wisdom. Your work has inspired me to apply that philosophy to my research in humanitarian AI systems. The connection across generations, across oceans, across disciplines reminded Maya that influence flowed in patterns too complex to fully comprehend, like the ocean currents her grandfather had taught her to read. The most important patterns are the ones most people miss, she told Isabella, echoing her grandfather's words. Keep watching for them. They'll guide you when technical knowledge alone isn't enough. As Maya left MIT that evening, she felt a sense of completion. The wisdom that had begun on fishing boats had traveled across oceans, through military hierarchies, into international policy, and now into the minds of those who would shape the technological future. Her grandfather had taught her that true mastery wasn't about control, but about harmony, working with forces larger than yourself rather than against them. That principle had guided her from maritime marksmanship to ethical frameworks for autonomous systems, from military training to international policy. The tattoo on her arm caught the late afternoon sunlight, each mark telling part of her story, each pattern connecting her to traditions that had sustained people through challenges for generations. What had once been hidden was now a visible reminder that wisdom could travel across time and space without losing its essence. Excellence didn't need to announce itself. It just needed to be ready when called upon. And Maya Chun, once dismissed as just cleaning weapons until her tattoo revealed her true identity, had answered that call in ways neither she nor her grandfather could have imagined. Not through force or authority, but through the quiet power of wisdom recognized, respected, and applied to the challenges of a changing world. As night fell over Cambridge, Maya looked up at the stars, the same stars that had guided fishermen in the Philippines for countless generations, the same stars that would shine on whatever future these young engineers created with their innovation. And she hoped their wisdom. The journey continued, the wisdom expanded, the legacy grew. Not in monuments or accolades, but in lives improved, decisions guided, and values preserved across the technological revolutions to come. In the end, that was the true measure of impact, not what you accomplished yourself, but what you enabled others to accomplish by sharing the wisdom you had gained. Not the power you wielded, but the responsibility you upheld. Not the technology you mastered, but the humanity you preserved. That was her grandfather's legacy. That was her own. And that would be the foundation upon which future generations would build a world where technology served humanity's highest ideals rather than its darkest impulses. Excellence didn't need to announce itself. It just needed to be ready when called upon. And across generations, across oceans, across technological revolutions, that readiness, that excellence would continue to answer when the moment demanded wisdom, courage, and the quiet strength that came from knowing exactly who you were and what you stood for. The world would continue to change. Technologies would evolve in ways impossible to predict. But the fundamental principles her grandfather had taught her on those fishing boats, respect for forces greater than yourself, precision in action, responsibility for consequences, and the wisdom to know when to act and when to wait, these would remain as relevant in the age of artificial intelligence as they had been in the age of fishing nets. That was the true power of wisdom, not that it provided specific answers for every situation, but that it offered enduring principles that could guide judgment through changing circumstances and evolving challenges. And in a world of increasingly autonomous systems, human judgment, informed by wisdom, guided by values, and committed to responsibility, would remain the true source of strength and the foundation of ethical progress. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.